Hello and welcome to UAT Time within the United Countries special by First Ukraine. You can find us on the frequencies available on our website firstua.com. I'm Sergey Velichanskiy.
I am Olivier Vedrine. UAT Time is dedicated to bring Ukraine and Europe closer to each other by introducing the real Ukraine to the rest of the world.
The term Ukraine's military miracle is not just a nice wording, but it has a deep meaning, which is paid for by lives of many Ukrainian soldiers and volunteers.
Our guest today is Peter Dickinson, chef editor of Business Ukraine magazine.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for stopping by again, actually.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while. You were one of our first guests at the show.
Pleasure to be back.
All right, thank you. This world doesn't stop surprising us with all the latest news that take place. That's why it seems like UAT Time will go on and on, recording and talking about other issues. But especially your latest article in your magazine, Business Ukraine.
September.
Oh, okay, so it's in September, but it's still very up to date because it deals with an issue of Ukraine's military miracle. What do you believe in that? What do you see?
To be honest, it was an article that I felt quite strongly about because I think there is a tendency in Ukraine to be pessimistic at times, to be focused on problematic issues and negatives. And certainly in terms of the military situation, I think there was a lot of concerns about the poor funding for the army, issues about conscription, issues about the supplies of the army, the performance, various specific defeats or setbacks the army had suffered. And I thought it was important for the Ukrainian and international audience to put out a counterpoint to say, hold on, actually in 2014, the country was on the brink of collapse. Yeah. And militarily, it was on the brink of occupation. Yeah. Arguably the whole country, certainly I think realistically half the country, but it didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Well, I think this is a military miracle. The military miracle came largely from the work of individual Ukrainians, especially the volunteers.
It's true that I remember back in that time when pretty much all troops that were going to the front line, they had even no uniform. Yeah. I mean, if you see the pictures of that time, I mean, every single soldier had their own uniform that he was able to he managed to get because it was not unified. I mean, everyone had what they could have gotten, let alone bulletproof vests. And the government provided only the guns, the machine guns, and that's all.
And some machine guns were broken also.
Well, all
and that was really a lot of my friends were on ATO and are still on ATO, and the beginning was very difficult. They had not a lot of weapons to fight. And I am when I saw that you said it is because the individuals will. I am totally agree with that. You talk about also money support of the individuals or the people. I am totally agree about that. How many money these people give to his own army? When you see the Canadian diaspora, they send some furniture to the Ukrainian army or the U.S. diaspora, and that's really, I say, the soul of the people.
Well, I think there was a very big question mark in April 2014 of whether Ukraine would fight at all. I think what happened in Crimea with the takeover was effectively without any military resistance. There was a period of extreme tension where nobody knew what would happen, but eventually the Ukrainian forces withdrew without fighting. So I think there was a sense, and I'm sure that it was part of the calculus in Moscow, in the Kremlin, that they could do it and they wouldn't face a military opposition. At the time, Russia had very good knowledge of Ukraine's military capabilities because of the relationship, let's call it, between the Yanukovych regime and the Kremlin. So I'm sure that they they'd done their sums, they'd made their estimates, and they had reached the decision that they wouldn't face any opposition. So they were quite confident that they could go into East Ukraine and replicate what had happened in Crimea. But again, we had this popular wave, this pushback from the ordinary Ukrainians.
When you wrote 6,000 soldiers in capacity of fighting, this is true.
Yes.
I have the same number in my information, and this is because, you know, during years and years, Yanukovych destroyed totally the Ukrainian army.
Well, I think, in fairness, I think we need to recognize that it wasn't only Yanukovych and the Yanukovych government.
Exactly.
It went on for many, many years. And in the 1990s, the sell-off of Ukrainian military hardware was notorious around the world. And you know, it was fueling conflicts in the Balkans, in Africa, across the world. And the Ukrainian technology, or Soviet technology and weapons hardware that the Ukrainian government had inherited, was one of the assets that was sold off with the most enthusiasm in the 1990s. And I think that there was very little time to actually finance the government, the army. So I think under Yanukovych, my understanding is that it was a deliberate attempt to reduce defense capabilities of the country. It was a systematic approach, but in many ways the neglect that came before that was just as damaging.
Well, and to be honest, we, being a peaceful nation, we didn't see any enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, really, who did we, want to fight with? I mean, we have friendly Poland, we have, Romania, Slovakia, Belarus, and Russia, pretty much all the brotherly countries.
Well, there was the Ukrainian military doctrine and Ukrainian military planning until 2014 was always based on the concept of an attack from the West, which is crazy. But that was all the only idea they could think about was maybe somehow something. So yeah, it's also worth remembering that there was no contingency planning at all for what to do if Russia decided to attack.
Especially if we talk about the beginning, which was a hybrid war, which was, the implementation of and the use of civil societies, civil people, that took away all the government buildings. So it was not a typical invasion at first.
No.
So nobody was prepared for that. So supposedly it was the police department or the internal affairs that should have dealt with that. That's why they still call it ATO instead of a war.
Well, I think that to be honest, I think that the form of hybrid warfare that the Russians practice today in Ukraine, and that is the threat of which is also in the Baltics, in Kazakhstan, in Belarus, and the neighborhood countries, I don't think there's any really efficient military doctrine yet developed to counter this from any country. I know that the NATO planners now are focusing on this, the NATO HQ and the individual member countries and nations across the world are watching Ukraine very closely because they're adapting to what is actually a new form of offensive, which it's very difficult to counter with military forms because it has so many different aspects. There's the economic, there's the informational, there's the disinformational. So it's going to be a process where I think in the coming years, a lot of people will come to Ukraine. It's ironic in a way that now we've got trainers coming to Ukraine to train the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
I think in the future they'll be coming to Ukraine to learn from the Ukrainians and to talk to the Ukrainian military and to talk to the Ukrainian civil authorities and say, what's it like? How does it work? What tactics have you found are effective or not? And Ukraine will be able to share that experience.
We were not NATO was not prepared for this type of war, hybrid war. This is very new war, and I think I agree. The Russian military doctrine is using now the same, or can use the same in Kazakhstan, Baltic state. They are no more a superpower country, but they can disturb on their borders, no more. Not more than that. But for NATO, this is a nightmare because we cannot answer with conventional war.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Well, it creates some novel challenges because these things have not been encountered before in the modern period. Although if we look back historically, the invasion, the Soviet, in fact today is the anniversary of the Soviet invasion of Finland in 1939, which was also conducted in support of alleged local forces, and was also previewed by an information campaign suggesting that the Finnish government was not legitimate.
So there are some patterns.
So there are parallels. The Russians, the Soviets used the same tactics in the Baltics in 1940, when they went into Eastern Europe in the Second World War, as the Nazis were forced back towards Germany, and they began conquering East European countries. Again, the same thing would happen. They would come in and say, we're supporting the Communist Party here, we're supporting the socialists there, and they would set up puppet administrations, which in some ways share a lot with the DNR, LNR structures that they've created in East Ukraine.
But it's very difficult to face that for NATO.
Well, people forgot. People forgot, and they don't realise the continuity in it. There's a generation now who've basically, I mean, it's 25 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. People have discarded those previous concerns and interests.
Come on, during years and years, we were prepared to face some Soviet division of tanks, a Soviet division of infantry, and now we have this hybrid war.
Well, I'm surprised that the intelligence overslept that, you know, somehow the NATO intelligence or the intelligence of other armies, I mean, what do they study in the universities, in the military universities? I mean, if this was the, you know, the occasions that took place dozens of years ago, and now there is nothing new, but maybe with a little different shape.
Well, it's more sophisticated now, and I think certain aspects are a lot more, certainly the informational side of it is a lot stronger than it would have been in the 1930s or 40s. Yeah. But having said that, it's a valid point. I think to be fair to the intelligence community, yes, they were caught asleep. They missed this one badly. But secondly, I mean, I think everybody did. Nobody during the Euromaidan time, even though everyone could see that Russia was cranking up its information campaigns, it was developing a huge amount of support for aggression against Ukraine. No one thought they would do it, because those days the accepted belief was, I think, amongst politicians, military, and pundits, analysts, was that those days are gone. You know, people don't invade anymore.
But I think, you know, we underestimated the Russian frustration after the end of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
We we say, okay, Soviet Union collapsed. Now, okay, this is time to peace.
Yeah.
And we underestimated this frustration, because in the mind of the Russian elite, Soviet system, post-Soviet system, or Putin system, they are still thinking like an empire, and the frustration of the end of the Soviet Union is here, really. And you have to think also, when you are in army, or when you are in NATO, or when you think like an officer or a military person, you have, we say, a doctrine, and everybody is in this way. And if one say, oh no, please look at, nobody listened. That was the story before the Second World War.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now the miracle. What else can we cover right now about the miracle, or else I have a couple of questions about the world politics.
Well, if we can just for a moment dwell on the idea of what Ukraine has achieved,
yes.
And I would pay, I think, I would want to pay special attention or put an emphasis on the volunteer battalions. I think they have become a stigmatized group in some respects because of the political extremism amongst some of the recruits, some of the volunteers, and that's awkward. That's certainly something that Ukraine needs to be very careful of, where you see this extreme nationalism, where you see sympathies for extremist opinions. But I don't think it's fair to brand them all within that group. I think the vast majority, thousands and thousands of people who are there, who are fighting, who have fought, and who continue to fight, are, you know, real heroes who've done an incredible, who've done perhaps, you know, maybe, you know, unprecedented, certainly in modern history, modern European history, an unprecedented job, and they've really saved this country. Last year they saved this nation.
Well,
and you know that we have less nationalists in Ukraine than in France.
Well, actually, you could apply that to any European country.
Yeah,
and I think this is another part of the Russian information campaign, which is seeped out, and to the extent that I feel that I need to say that, in fact, which perhaps we shouldn't, but yeah.
But I want to come back to the volunteers.
Yes.
In fact, the battle of the volunteers is taking a little different shape right now, because now they no longer need to provide, you know, socks, pants, shirts, and all that, because now it's being provided by the country. But right now, what good has taken place is that some famous or most effective volunteers have become volunteers representatives in the Ministry of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I mean, pretty much daily I read some of their reports about the battle that they have to deal with on a daily basis, with the red tape, with the you know, different you know, Ministry of Defense and General Staff, the relationships and responsibilities. Because if you are in the Ministry of Defense, you know, you want, for instance, you provide the whole set of uniform for the army, but the General Staff is responsible of delivering that. And sometimes people on the front line, they don't get it, and they complain that the Ministry of Defense hasn't provided, but in reality, they've got it. So things like this, the red tape that is there, that's the fight right now that they deal with every day.
All armies are bureaucracies, you know. All armies, if you talk to the, you know, and it varies, of course, and in Ukraine, the argument might be about socks or jackets or hats. With the American army in Iraq, it was, you know, trillions of dollars going missing somewhere on some sort of huge budgetary issue. So, you know, there's a huge bureaucracies, and things will go missing, and things that, you know,
this is normal for an army.
I would say for an army in a time of war, it is absolutely normal. So it's not something that people should celebrate, but I don't think it's something that we should hang our heads and say, oh,
well, that's
you know,
a good point,
terrible,
honestly,
because, you know, when a war is lost and things go wrong, everybody sits down and apportions blame and says, well, we didn't have this and we didn't have that, we didn't have that. But when there is a success, everyone forgets about these issues, and you think they didn't happen, but they always happen, actually. In any military campaign, there's always dogged by these sort of things. It's part of the function, and these are huge organizations, you know,
So what I'm saying is that the volunteers are still battling, and it's unique what's happening. Honestly, that even the fact that they have allowed volunteers into decision-making processes, that is really good.
Well, I think they have to bring them into the official structures now, and we've seen that quite successfully happening. And a lot of the key flashpoints on the front lines around Pisky and Donetsk Airport, at the Mariupol front lines up towards Lugansk, all these areas where volunteer groups had been literally holding the line. They've now been rotated out, or they've been amalgamated into existing divisions. So this is part of the international debate where the Ukrainian government is trying to get aid and support, and a lot of foreign countries are very understandably reticent about giving arms, weapons, or any military equipment to basically just random people. They say, you know, if we give you supplies, you must have complete control over these people. So it's a prerequisite to get that support. And we've just seen President Obama has now signed through some lethal aid, finally, after a very long push. But again, that's part of the process. That wouldn't have happened a year ago. One of the reasons was there were all these people, I call them heroes. I think they are heroes, but, you know, from the foreign point of view, they're just a bunch of guys running around with guns. No one knows who they are, who they answer to, who controls them. So they can't give these people weapons.
But
so
you know that the Ukrainian army and the president and the Rada, the Rada voted for a law to give a special status for the foreigners who are fighting in the Ukrainian army. and I know because I worked on this law. This law was signed at the end of October by the president, and this is a good sign of foreign support, but also that Ukraine recognize that some foreigners are fighting for Ukraine. And this is also very good too, because that means that Ukraine manage the army, manage the volunteers. And for the foreigner, let's say, okay, Ukraine is managing that. We can trust this on Ukraine, and we can give weapons.
Yeah, so it's all very well to be impressed by this sacrifice and the bravery and the patriotism of these volunteer groups, but ultimately, to gain international support, they have to be within recognized structures.
This law was necessary to have this support.
Yeah.
And that, that was very difficult too. We did a lot of lobbying too.
Yes, that's true, but this law pretty much helps for the future, but as far as I understand, it doesn't do much for those that had been on the front
The problem
line.
is...
So there is still discussions.
The law is in the process. This is not easy, really not easy.
Well, Ukraine needs to think long term now militarily, because even if, and it's a big if, the situation in East Ukraine solidifies completely in the next weeks or months, the threat will be there for years now, and it won't go away for a generation at least, and regardless of whatever, no one will be able to write off the threat now for a generation. So Ukraine will have to become, have to learn from countries like Israel to live in a permanent state of military readiness.
I hope not.
Well, it's the reality. I mean,
but we can't change the geographic position.
But you wrote about the next generation.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, because this war will be is in the history and will be in the mind of the next generation. And what do you think about that? What can be the impact of that?
Well, I think the generation growing up, I wouldn't want to put the emphasis on animosity towards Russia, although I think that's something we can't ignore. Clearly, there's a generation of Ukrainians growing up who now will find their parents' attitudes towards close ties with Russia, or even indivisibility with Russia, very strange given the context that they've experienced. But I think also they will see, they will have a much clearer sense of identity as Ukrainians.
Yes.
Unfortunately, but it's a fact of history, almost every national identity is forged in time of war. If you go back, I'm English, the English national identity is traced, and this is awkward speaking with you, Olivier, is with the 100 Years' War with France. Yeah. This is when the war first, this is when the ideas of, this is when...
You attacked us, we never attacked.
I accept that, but it was a long time ago, it's nice. But the point is, this is the way it always works. When conflicts, because you unite against an outside threat or another, and in this case, this is Russia.
It had never really been before when you are in the pub and the Ukrainian anthem is played, people stand up.
Yes.
I mean, really, it had never happened.
Yeah.
Because if you are on the stadium, yes, but really just in the pub. Yeah. Just to stand up and to admire your anthem and sing the words.
No, I concur. I mean, when I first came to Ukraine at the end of the 1990s, I can say that and I used to love. I'm a big football fan, and I would often go to the games, and people they didn't know the anthem, they didn't know the words, they weren't aware of it. That's a very striking aspect of what we've seen over the last year and a half. That now there's this sense of not just a defensive patriotism, but a pride. That people take pride in what they've done, and I think that the fact that all this volunteerism is throughout society will have a very profound effect for the next generation. One point about the next generation I would probably make as well, talking to people from the front lines and journalists who've been embedded with the army, they say one of the most powerful things they find there, and that for the soldiers is most important, are the pictures they get from children.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian school children, Ukrainian youths sending pictures saying, come home safe, patriotic themes, this as a, you know, they're everywhere. When you see,
Yeah.
you see images from the front line,
Yeah.
the soldiers put them everywhere because it reminds them of what they're doing there. And the children who've been involved in that process as well will also carry that through for the rest of their lives.
Time is up. As
They're
usual.
fighting for those
them?
children.
What are they doing?
Yes. Well, actually, I just wanted to say thank you for covering the issues like this, and thank you for viewing the situation the way you do, and you know, portraying those things and issues on your magazine, on the pages of your magazine. So thank you very much.
It's an honor.
All right. So it was United Country, UAT Time by First Ukraine. Our guest was Peter Dickinson, chief editor of Business Ukraine magazine.
Olivier Vedrine and Sergey Velichanskiy were working for you in the studio. Stay with us and we will show to you the real Ukraine.
Thank you for being with us. Have a good day and see you soon.